Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of the Vitalogy podcast. Hello, Internet. The interwebs are here, and hello, Ryan.
Josh, it's good to see you, man.
Good to see you, man.
Happy Wednesday to you.
Yes, indeed. Happy Wednesday to everybody. Happy Wednesday in the middle of June, man.
I know.
What
all of
happened?
All of a sudden, it's summertime.
It is summertime. I guess summer doesn't technically start yet, though, right?
Yeah, for a
That's
few
confusing.
weeks here. Yeah.
That makes no sense.
Well, it
Just
started for
start
a
it.
kid, so
It did
that means
start.
it started.
Yeah, remember? Oh man, okay. Speaking of that, my kids, one of my kids, my youngest, Josiah, he's not watching, so I'm gonna call him out. He was finishing school, so because both of our kids just finished school, not both, all of our kids
Yep.
just finished school on yesterday, and so my Josiah was like mourning that he has to go to school one more day.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
because a half day where you don't do anything is really, really difficult for him. But then he said, "Oh man, think about Mr. Nichols, his teacher, who's a fabulous teacher, by the way. Mr. Nichols over at LR Green, who's just great with our kids. We had all three of our kids go through him. But he
Nice.
says, think about Mr. Nichols. He's got to keep working. We are done with school, but he has to keep working for like another week," which I don't even think it is that much. But he's, then he says, I mean, if he works then his summer break is only going to be like a month. And I thought, oh man, Josiah. So I said, well, Josiah, I don't get a summer break. and he goes, well, yeah, no, his response, he had a response for it right away. He says, well, yeah, Dad, but your job is fun.
Hey, and here we are.
I guess here we are, right? So I guess I get a fun job.
And teaching isn't.
Yes. I guess not. So it is. This is a ton of fun. But I'm
awesome.
glad he
That's great.
thinks that I don't know what he thinks I do all day.
But it's fun.
But it is
whatever
fun.
it is, it's fun.
It's just having fun.
And I agree. It is fun.
It absolutely is most of the time. Oh yes, indeed. Well, anyway, yes. Welcome to summer. You guys, our kids are off. You guys
Kids are
have
off. They're
big plans?
we're gonna go to Colorado for about 10 days. Spend some time with Kelly's side. Spend some time with my side of the family, and camp and explore Fort Collins and things like that. So it'll be great. Yeah.
Love
what
it.
about you?
Way to go. Yeah, we actually get a chance to go to Hawaii. I mean, I've got in-laws that take us. That it's amazing. Such a great gift. So we get to go, and it's gonna be a blast.
Right on.
Can't wait.
Right
Can't
on.
wait. We're doing some things. Our kids are. I have a kid right now at Hume Lake. So man, shout out to all the people that are in Hume Lake. They're not watching, of course. Maybe they will later. High school students, maybe not so much. But there's a bunch of leaders and 230 some people up at Hume Lake right now. And my Caleb, my oldest, is there. And it's funny, Hume Lake, I say they're not listening because there is literally no internet there.
Okay.
I mean, no service, no cell service. It is ideal for camp.
It's great.
Yes. Because kids will take their phones, and if there is service, you have to pry it out of their hands, or I'll always be telling them stop being on your phone or whatever. But Hume Lake has actually fought to not allow cell service to be on their property.
That's a great idea.
Isn't it
Good
funny?
for them. Huh.
Isn't it funny? They don't allow it. So anyway, they're up there, but we were realizing that our kids are only going to be home all together for 1 week this summer.
That's it.
Wow. One consistent week, right? So just because they're each at different camps, and it's
wow. That's sad.
Oh, I was thinking it was really exciting because then they'd be gone. But no,
that too.
No, we do have one.
They're excited.
We have 1 week, and we're not on vacation, but it'll be fun because all three kids are at a camp at the same time. So
yes,
that's gonna be fun. Go
that
figure.
Week is on our calendar.
Oh yes, indeed.
Glory.
I know. How cool is that? So anyway, that's us. Mark and his mom Rose is watching. Hello.
Thanks for watching, you guys.
Good to see you. And anybody else? By the way, someone did ask me. Someone said, "I thank you for not calling us out." And so he was actually watching, and on some platforms it says who's watching. If you're out there watching, we don't know you're watching, just to be clear, right? We don't see you unless you comment, okay?
We don't.
So there you go. Michael Lyons, thank you very
Michael.
much.
Good to see you.
And great to see you. So we don't know you're watching unless you comment. So don't be scared. We're not going to call you out unless you actually say something, and then we will engage with you. But we always love it. And we love your questions, your comments, your thoughts. I love so much insight that you all bring to this.
Absolutely.
And so we're gonna like always dive into a little bit behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And in a topic that has some potential areas of application here that we can wrestle with, right?
Yeah. A challenging text, I think.
Yes.
At least in light of the world that we live in and all the different things that have gone on in the United States and really globally over the last few years. This text seems pretty pertinent, I think, to the way that we live, and maybe wants to press on us a little bit more than, I don't know, maybe more than we want it to. Is that safe?
Usually I feel like that's generally true.
Yeah.
With scripture, right? We often
it
does that.
It at least wants to provoke us to ask some questions that maybe we've grown too comfortable with our answers to.
That's a good point. But so we're gonna dive in, in 1 Corinthians chapter 9. Now,
yes.
But before we do, I don't think we've talked about this. In fact, the title of this season is called Saints and Stones. Saints and Stones. I know that because I preached the first one.
Yes.
About Thursday, they told me that I was preaching. Fortunately, I asked. I was like, "Hey guys, what is the season?
Is this?
What season?" And they told me. I was scratching my head for a little bit. I think I nailed it. I think I figured out what was behind it pretty well. But tell us a little bit about your thoughts behind that title.
Well, there's a lot about. Okay, so this was a title that Nate Keating actually came up with.
Okay, yeah, awesome.
And he proposed it, and I thought, great, because I didn't have a better one.
Yeah, I think it's a great one.
It's sort of fun because the idea is you have these saints, and then really so much of this section is about idolatry.
Yeah,
and the idea of, will we be a building block or a stumbling stone?
Yep.
And so it was sort of a play on words with that idea of stones and the different ways that stones are used.
Okay.
So that's the idea.
That's definitely how I took that second one.
Yeah.
But I forgot that. Because the idolatry piece is going to be a big part of it.
It is.
Coming up.
Yep.
Next week or the next week?
Next week. Yes. Not this week.
Not this coming week.
Not
but
this Sunday,
the next one.
Yeah. I'm like, wait.
Yeah.
It all gets messy on Wednesday because we do our writing team meeting, and so I've got a few different. We're talking about message from last week. I wrote some of the message for this week this morning, and then we talked about next week today. So there's a lot in my mind right now, but
there absolutely is. That absolutely is. And so what Ryan does here is kind of go back a week now.
Yeah.
Right. Because all the study was done like a week ago. And then he preached it last week, but then there's new study. So
this text is, I think, fascinating because on the surface, you could read it and be like, man, this doesn't have anything to say to us today. Because the 1 Corinthians 9, and I think you can make the same argument with food sacrificed to idols. For the 1 Corinthians 9 is even a little bit more narrowed because Paul's essentially saying, I could have gotten paid for the ministry I did among you, but I chose not to use that right.
Yeah, so that could apply to everyone who's ever been an apostle. which is right. I mean, So that's I guess very narrow. No.
It certainly could apply to people who work at a church.
It can now, yes, of course.
And I guess anybody could do their job for free if they wanted to and felt like that was what was best. I don't know, but the direct application of this passage, like in the sort of concentric rings that you have, the closest application to the original application is not really all that applicable in the sense of like, we just don't really deal with this issue. And ironically, so Can we jump in?
Yes.
The thing that struck me was that Paul essentially said, I'm not going to get paid for my gospel proclamation, the work that I'm doing spiritually among you, because that would create a barrier in between you and the gospel.
Yep.
Well, which we can talk about in just a second. But ironically, it didn't work.
Yes, right.
And he never quite identifies that in this chapter. But the fact that he didn't take the money actually created a barrier in and of itself, especially within the religious community that expected a legitimate apostle to exercise that right.
Yeah. So, okay. Because here's what's happening. And there's so many layers to this, right? That he has decided not to take a paycheck. Okay.
Correct.
Not to ask them to help support his ministry.
Yes.
Right. It's not like there was someone writing a paycheck, but he decided not to do that. So they're not giving him any money, and then they're saying, "Well, wait a minute, you must not be a real apostle because you're not. If you were, you'd be taking our money."
Yeah,
as if they're like, "Hey, we just want to pay." We want to give it away.
This is how it's done.
Yes, they've somehow learned that, and so now he's in the situation where he has to explain why he made the decision in the first place to not take any money, and to say, "No, I really am a real apostle." Right? I mean,
yeah.
Oh, that's
because he'll tell us why he did it. And he says, I didn't take a paycheck so that it wouldn't create an obstacle between you and the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
But ironically, in this text, he never addresses the fact that not taking a paycheck created the same obstacle he didn't want to take by taking one.
Yep.
And so you sort of wonder, like, well, Paul, why not just at least point that out? Like, the irony of this, right?
Yes.
Like, could have been, I don't know. But
yes. Oh. Hey, by the way, but let me just say hi to Carolyn. Carolyn says that she's been waiting for this all day. Oh, right thank you.
It is good to hear from you, Carolyn.
We love Carolyn. All right. Thanks. All right.
So here's the deal. This section is all about Paul's rights as an apostle, what he can legitimately claim and receive as an apostle, and the fact that he lays down those rights. He surrenders those rights instead of exercising them. And as I read through this passage, I started to think about all the rights that we enjoy, especially as Americans. I mean, not everybody that listens is an American, and not everybody that goes to our church is, but to a large population of them are.
Yes, yeah.
We're really, I would argue that we are. It's built into our national psyche to not only value but defend and fight for our rights.
Our rights, absolutely.
And so, when the apostle Paul comes along and says, I have this right, but I'm not going to exercise it, there's a greater good than my rights. That potentially could be something that as Americans, we go, whoa, back on up, buddy.
Yes.
Because that's one of the founding distinctives of our country. We have rights, we exercise them, we defend them, and we enjoy them.
Yes. And if I have a right, I'm going to exercise that right.
Absolutely. That's why we have them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What else is it for? Oof. Yeah.
So I sensed, at least in my own soul, some tension growing in regards to, gosh, do I have that same perspective, you know?
And because you pointed out, right, that now, once again, I'm mixing up messages. I hope this is the right message. But yeah,
I'll say yes, even if it's not.
You pointed out that he didn't just correct their thinking, right? To say, like, which would have been a very reasonable thing to do.
I wish he would have done that.
Right? Like, okay, see, you were wrong in the way you were approaching this.
Yeah, let me help you think about this
the right way, right?
Correctly.
Which is kind of the way that we would do it. Instead, he decides to limit his own rights.
Yeah.
In this, from the way back in the beginning, now he's explaining that going forward.
Yes.
So interesting.
Same thing he encourages them to do with food sacrifice to idols, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Because this is in that same
it's
kind
in
of big
whole
section.
Yes. So I think 1 Corinthians chapter 9 is his personal application of what he was encouraging the Corinthians to do in 1 Corinthians chapter 8. He's
absolutely.
It would look sort of like this.
How
I was an apostle among you and didn't take a paycheck.
Yeah, I thought that was a great great observation.
They're like, we didn't pay him?
Yeah.
Is he saying we owe him money?
Yeah. Yeah, well, he kind of asks for it back in Second Corinthians. So yeah, that's interesting.
He comes around.
Oh man. So yeah, that is such a different way of looking at it. That instead of just explaining to everybody that, hey, you've got this right, so now go use it, which is that is a very American way to do it.
Very.
And
Is it American? Is it what? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Certainly we would do that, right? I wonder if
Yes.
it's a Western,
Yes.
like, Enlightenment sort of influenced what's right, what's wrong, that type of an idea.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But
yeah, Michael says that rights can be abused, which could compromise the sharing of the gospel.
yeah,
Which, yeah,
no doubt.
yes, no, that is the principle that Paul's working with here, and yet, so this is the issue, and not in some ways that people talk about rights in America, that the rights are the most important thing, so that you would never compromise, or you would never let go of rights
Ever.
and especially, I mean, for anything. But what Paul's saying is to not exercise his rights. Now,
Yeah.
And this is where it does get interesting.
And not necessarily taking advantage of them or abusing them, but even a good right that was potentially nebulous, but that could have created some sort of blockage between the gospel. He goes,
yes,
there's nothing wrong with this. There's nothing inherently evil about this. There's no abuse of this power, but I'm not going to use it.
Yeah. Now, so here's where I think that's Paul speaking from a position of moral strength. Okay, because it takes a lot more moral will, virtue in a sense, to have a right and then to not use it for the sake of something better.
Yes.
Than to have a right and use it.
Yeah.
Right? Because anyone can, exercise a right? I mean, do what they want in a sense. But to say, no, I'm going to not do that, that takes a stronger person.
It does.
And this brings me now. I don't know if I'm jumping ahead yet. I don't want to move too far, but because this was part of the context of what you said. You did point out something that I think was important, that people, when societies do lay down their rights, they can get into how'd you put that? Do you remember?
Yeah, no, I was very.
This was
I was pretty intentional about this because I didn't want to be misunderstood.
And sorry if I'm jumping. I think I might be jumping way ahead.
No, it's fine. I said, let me clearly state what I'm not saying. I'm not saying that we should universally and unequivocally lay down our rights. I'm well aware that when you surrender your rights and people start to take advantage of you, eventually evil people take power. We've seen ruthless dictator-driven regimes all over the globe prove that time and time again. Sometimes the best way to care for people is to fight for your rights, but not every time.
Yeah, interesting. That really stood out to me. I think that was a great point that you say. Now, and one thing, and I think this is what you're getting at. I think you just read that we fight for our rights.
Yes.
But I think what a lot of people, especially the ones that fought for our rights, by fighting, they were actually giving up their rights, and they were fighting for someone else's rights.
Yep.
Right. That's the thing that's what makes the sacrifice of that we celebrate on Memorial Day so amazing, is that people were giving up their own rights and literally dying in order to fight for yours, mine, yours.
Yeah.
Right. That's what's powerful about that we need to fight for other people's rights.
Right.
But so much of the conversation today sounds like it's fighting for my rights.
Yeah.
And that just, there's something about that that's just not as beautiful.
I agree.
Right?
Yeah, I'd agree. But it is front and center. I mean, this issue is front and center in news cycles, etc. I mean, I pointed out a few areas where we feel like we've lost rights, or rights have been revoked that we used to enjoy, whether it's freedom of speech and who can or cannot tweet, right?
Yes.
Thou shalt not tweet, or being able to leave our house. Like there was a, lockdown, told you can't leave. And that was a right that was revoked, that we went, wow, I never thought we'd really get there in the US.
Remember that?
I mean, even just trying to hike, go on hikes.
Oh yeah, remember that?
Right. And like, we went to a few trailheads that were like blocked off, signs, you were not allowed to eat, and like, it's a hike. But
weird. No one knew what they were doing.
No. So I mean, at the risk of getting too controversial, like the right to decide whether or not I'm going to get a vaccine, right?
Yeah.
And or the right to decide whether or not I want to wear a mask. The right to decide who can or cannot own a firearm, right? These are all rights that are being debated in our time, but really they're being debated because we long for them, right? And we're used to them. And now there's been some repealing of those, and we see how much we long for and love rights by the way that we will go, not on our watch.
Totally.
And like I said, that's not always a good thing. That's not always a bad thing. It's just a reality. We are used to our rights. We love our rights. We defend our rights. And this passage, Paul says, I lay down my rights.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely right. And at the same time, let's just assume these rights have been, a lot of these rights have been kind of, in a sense, people's have had these rights for a long time. But there's also been a shift in society, in our world, where it seems like there's a lot of people. There are more people abusing those rights. So this is where the rights, and in order to be someone who can exercise rights, you have to be of a certain character. This is what I'm getting with Paul. In order to responsibly use those rights, exercise those rights.
Oh, there's no doubt about that. And the founding fathers understood the fact that there's a sense of morality built in that we needed to maintain in order for the republic to function.
Yes.
And they were very clear on that without a sense of morality, agreed upon morality, then this whole experiment that we call the United States would go off the rails. And
because I mean, let's just face it, you guys. There's we want rights, and we think that we can handle the rights, right?
It's other people, right?
Right, it's other people. Like they talk about they talk about bans on even things like guns, like assault AR-15 guns or something like that. Okay? I don't own an AR-15 gun. I do own some little 22s. Okay, they're little, like, there's a step above a BB gun. All right, so now I do. They're locked away and all those things. But I kid you not, and this is maybe human nature, but they start talking about, like, shutting down or whatever, banning assault rifles, and I think to myself, well, I probably need one before they do that, right? What in the world do I need an AR-15 for? I don't. But just the fact that they're saying they might take it away, I think, there's maybe a possibility, right?
That's funny.
Isn't that funny? Yeah. We do that, but even in doing that, I'm thinking to myself, well, I'm responsible.
Yes.
Because, I'm whatever. I think more highly of myself. Oh, yes. Oh, much. Yes. But at the same time, I don't want any 18-year-old kid or I don't want any person with that right. Yeah. There's some people, I know them.
Yeah.
That I think, oh my goodness, I do not want them to go by that. I just don't. I have a 15-and-a-half-year-old in 2.5 years. Is that really right? Oh my word. In 2.5 years, I'm like, the math didn't make sense in my head. He'll be 18. Is that true?
That's
that
is true.
I said those words and I thought, oh, that's not true, but I can't believe that's true. In 2.5 years, he'll be 18. And I don't think that his character is going to mature enough in 2.5 years to be responsible with that kind of thing. Now, that's a statement, and it's about my own son,
right?
And so,
well,
tricky.
I mentioned I don't know if I mentioned it every service, but pastoring in Littleton, Colorado,
yes,
there were 2 shootings while I was pastor that were within 5 miles of my church. Obviously, I grew up in. I had just graduated high school and was in college in Colorado when Columbine happened. The Aurora school shoot or the Aurora movie theater shooting. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah, absolutely.
A number of people were killed. Was 10 miles ish from where I went to high school.
God.
And so like that area has just been hit pretty hard with gun violence. And actually John Mark Comer in his book, God Has a Name, writes a little bit about that area of Colorado and how like his sense is that there's some sort of spiritual stronghold there. Wow. And anyway, but as I try to listen to the debates, it seems to me, and this is trying to give everybody the benefit of the doubt, which I generally like to do because
of course,
I think everybody wants the same thing.
Yeah.
As I listen to people debate, like even on both sides of the aisle, and like take out some of the ways that these debates are funded and all that, but I think at the core of people, most people don't want to see more mass shootings and violence. Like, no,
I think that's a safe statement to say.
Most people don't. Right, they just have very different visions about the way that we get there.
Yes,
right?
You're exactly right.
And so I think that's where Paul's question starts to come in to play, right? Is, okay, we all have this same goal. Most of us have the same goal. Like, we would love to see fewer mass shootings, right? Fewer gun violence.
Yeah.
We want less of that.
Yeah.
That's not a good thing. No societies flourish when that is a reality. So how do we get there? And then Paul's question starts to come into play. Do we get there by defending our rights or exercising our rights or surrendering them? And I do think that people could make a case for both, but I think it would benefit us to do, us collectively, some research about what is the best way to get there.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I think I think that some research on that is hugely important, because we're talking about something that it wasn't necessarily available in Paul's time, right? So he's living under an oppressive regime.
Undoubtedly.
It's not, he had more rights than some of the people he's even talking to. He definitely had more rights than the typical Jewish person, because he was Greek. But there's they lived a time when people could just decide, and especially as a Christian, they just decided that, to kill Christians, right?
Oh yeah, the people in charge made decisions, and it was
just done, right? It was no voting on it, none of that stuff. And yet what he's talking about, though, is a self-limiting freedom.
Correct.
Now, and what we're kind of talking about is this collective decision to self-limit, in a sense, right? Which, we do with other things. We've done that with things like seatbelts, stuff like that, right? That we've decided as a society to self-limit. We have the right to, but we have said that. Now, and here's my point. I do think that it's a moral high ground goes to the person who has the right and chooses to limit it himself or herself, right? That's what Paul's talking about, and I think that's the best kind. What we're seeing in our world is a bunch of people who have the right but are not being responsible with that right, and they are making mistakes with it. And that's when we as a society, I think, need to kind of stop and say, wait a minute, something's wrong, right? And so this is where, and then the question becomes, do we as a society impose this, or do we from the ground up try to teach it and things like that? I'd much rather have a bunch of moral people running around
But
sadly,
that's not necessarily the case.
I don't know if it's in the cards.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. It's and obviously I usually say something like these things are debated because they're debatable, right?
Yeah.
And there are two sides to that argument, and man, there's good people on both sides. People, and like I said, people that want the same thing. And I think Paul's question, even though it is more personal in this, has wider application, right? That could potentially help shape the conversation, at least for those who follow Jesus.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. This, in fact, so this is where morality is typically more of a personal conversation, right? I mean, or it's at least about individuals. So I think what you're doing is wrong. I think what you're doing is right. Okay, that's a moral.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. Sorry, audience. I pointed to you when when I said wrong. Those are moral judgments and decisions, right? And we have to learn to make those. But then that's what morality does. But what politics is actually, in a sense, morality in the city.
Right.
The polis, right? It's taking a look at the whole thing, and yet we don't think about it that way. We don't think about politics as being something that can be looking at the good of the world. How can we flourish our common life together? Instead, it's this battle for who's in control, for who can have power, and who can make decisions. And man, wouldn't it be nice if people thought about and really took the time to do the research, to get the data, to figure out what really is going to work best. Maybe that's just dreaming.
I hope not. My hope is that eventually in that whole common life, we start to ask the question, not whose side won, but did people win? Is there a stronger sense of flourishing and vitality, and that who cares what side gets it done? In my opinion, right?
Yeah, right.
Who gives a rip?
Exactly.
But as long as people are flourishing, that's the goal.
Exactly. Michael asks a good question in here: morality versus common sense. Are they same, similar, or different? Or what are the differences? He's asking. That's an interesting question.
Yeah, that is. I'll take a stab at it. I think there's a lot of crossover, is what I would say, but I don't think that they are one and the same. And I'll say common sense is typically defined as what works and what doesn't work. So there can be a sense of pragmatism, or even like ends justify the means type of a mentality when it comes to common sense. Morality, I would say, is based off of what is, I would argue, inherently right or wrong. And sometimes what's right doesn't always work. Yeah. Even if it's right, it may be harder. And so, I don't know.
Yeah.
Chime in.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of processing that. I think it's a fabulous question, Michael. That here's what I'm processing. That in an ideal world, in a sense, if common sense is kind of the natural way of things, there's this concept in morality called the natural law, right? And actually, you can go pretty far with that. C.S. Lewis does some great work with that, of explaining how so much of the moral realities and laws, in a sense, that govern life, are pretty evident.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way of wisdom.
It is the way of wisdom, exactly. Yeah. And yet, common sense in and of itself, I think, can lead you down some dangerous roads. In fact, you mentioned one of them. You're right. It could be ends justify the means. Sometimes works, but sometimes is terrible.
Yeah,
it sometimes leads to the worst kind of outcomes. Sometimes you can justify being a terrible, awful human just for some random outcome.
Right, because it works.
So, and that seems like it has a tinge of common sense. And this is where I think that morality kind of needs to rise above common sense. There's got to be something speaking to that. And of course, well, here we are talking about the scriptures being that God gives us that the Holy Spirit gives us that. And so I think you're right. There's some crossover, but I do think that morality needs to rise above it. And I think a Jesus-shaped kingdom mindset of morality is what needs to rise above that, because there's all sorts of different moralities.
Yeah.
But there you go. I don't
Good
know.
question.
That was a great question.
Good question.
And here we are. We've kind of gone. Well, we dove into this, didn't we?
Yeah.
This was a bit of a tangent. No, it's very related. But based on this idea, though, that.
Oh yeah, I think that this is the heart of the text, in my opinion.
Yes.
So yeah.
And this is how it applies. So it's not really a tangent, but this is how we can process some of these concepts.
Totally.
And how we can deal with them here. Someone else had brought up things like free speech. I think Michael brought that up too. I think of, you think of the same thing could be said about so many things. We don't want hate speech.
Right.
Nobody's looking for more hate speech. Right. And yet we also want our freedom to be able to say the right things. And we don't want someone telling us that talking about the Bible is hate speech.
Right.
Because, is that where it's going to go? And so it's so complicated.
It is complicated.
And so that's where back to common sense. We've got to have some common sense, but I think more than common sense, there needs to be this common respect, common language, a common assumption. So having a society with rights assumes that there's a general sense of morality, right?
Yes.
And that's what you're getting at.
Yeah. The founding fathers were, like I said, clear on that.
It was embedded in that. And when we don't, that's where it gets sticky.
Yep.
And so we can't operate as if we do. And so this is where in modern or American politics, both sides have seemingly a bad argument. And we could show, the more conservative, or sorry, the more so interesting, classically liberal is more conservative. Anyway, we'll say typically conservative today will say, well, we don't want to give any one person too much power.
Right.
Or we don't want to give the government too much power.
Yep.
Right. We want to leave it to the people. Well, then the other side will say, well, the people are not making good decisions, so we need the government. This is now both are not working, right? Because they're both actually right. The people aren't making great decisions, and the government's not making great decisions.
So the government's made up of the people. Yeah. There's the issue.
Dang it.
Yeah.
All right. So we're not gonna fix that.
We're not today anyway. One of the things about this passage, though, Josh, that really struck me was verse 12. Paul says, "Nevertheless, we've not made use of this right." So he's talking about getting paid for his work.
Yes.
But we endure anything rather than put an obstacle in the way of the gospel of Christ. And I thought, as I read that, what a great commitment that if my exercising of my right that I'm entitled to, that I may have earned, whatever, if my exercising of my right puts an obstacle or a barrier in between people and the gospel, Paul says, I'm not going to exercise that right. And I thought, as I started to think about it, just on a personal level, I thought, what a great lens through which to make decisions,
Yeah.
Is this going to get in the way of people coming to faith in Jesus? And the interesting thing about that is that we, at least in my estimation, post-enlightenment, we live in the digital age, the information age. We typically think people The barriers between people and the gospel are information oriented. If they just had this information, if they just knew this, if they could answer that question, then certainly they'd come to faith in Jesus. And Paul deconstructs that argument and essentially says, well, maybe what's standing in between people and the gospel isn't a lack of information, but maybe it's Christians.
Wow.
And I think he's saying to the church in Corinth, I refuse to be that guy. Like, even if it means I'm going to stay up late and work and make these tents and sell them on the tent market, right?
Yeah.
Even if it means that, I would rather that than me be the reason that you don't come to faith in Jesus.
Oh man. Okay. So as you said that, let's repeat that, because I think this is big. I'm just kind of processing all the other places in scripture where that rings true, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he's saying the biggest problem is not information. So I need to teach you something, but the biggest problem might be Christians.
I think that seems to me what he's saying, because to put an obstacle in the way of the gospel, in the context here, the obstacle that he could potentially have put in between people and the gospel is himself. Himself executing exercising his rights.
His own rights. Yes. Oh, that's exactly what he's getting at back in 8. That would explain Jesus's frustration with hypocrites, with the Jewish leaders that had the most truth that you could have at the time, right? I mean, they had it,
no doubt,
and they weren't living it.
Yeah.
Right? Because, and this is what Jesus would say, the opposite, the positive way of saying that is that they will know you by your love, right? That he's saying, like, they're not going to know you by how well you teach,
right?
By all the great information that you have, but they're going to know you by the way that you love each other. Oh my goodness. This is, it reminds me of Mahatma Gandhi's statement, right? The famous line.
You Christians, I like your Christ, but I'm not sure about you Christians.
Yes.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yes. And oh my goodness, isn't that true? That that everybody, not everybody, okay, but most people, very few people have a real problem with Jesus.
Few.
You know, and how could you? Goodness gracious. But it's Christians that kind of get in the way.
And it is challenging, right? Because this overlap of rights, and obstacles. Gosh, laying down rights is hard, and sometimes when you lay them down, you don't get them back, and it's complicated, right? I think this sounds like something Dallas Willard said, so I'll give him credit, even if it's not him. But being right is way better than being wrong.
That's right.
Yeah.
I think it's
something like that.
Something close to that. Yeah.
So, like, if I believe people are wrong, I would love to address that with them and help them be right.
Right. Yes. 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 Yeah, it's similar to him saying, if Jesus had a better way, he would have told us.
He would have been all for it.
Because he knew it was right. Yeah.
So there are issues of knowledge and information that are really important.
Yeah.
But man, I think Paul's saying the biggest thing you've got to address is your own attitude and the way and actions that could potentially drive a wedge between people and the gospel. So, I just think of how many things I've seen posted, like, on a social media platform, where I went, oh gosh, like, and then of course the way social media works is if a Christian posts something, it's every Christian stands behind them, right? And you're like, oh my goodness. And the obstacles between people, the digital obstacles between people and the gospel are just have grown over the last 2.5 years in an astounding way, I think.
Yeah.
And some of it is around this very issue, our rights.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a great observation. And so when we exercise our rights, okay, we have the potential, and this is something I think we have to keep in mind. In the exercising of our rights, we have to be careful not to allow that exercise of rights to be what gets in the way.
Yeah.
What becomes a hindrance to someone else. Ooh. Yeah.
And I think the way that that's really challenging in our day and time is, and I think you addressed this verse, and I pointed back to it just because I thought, gosh, it's so important as we try to learn how to live this out. Paul talks about in chapter 8 people's former associations and the way that that would shape their ability to either eat meat sacrificed to idols or not. And that's a lot of work, right? To listen to somebody's story, to figure out where they are, to acquiesce to their weaknesses and defer to them. And it's like, it's just way easier to have a way that you decide you're going to live and other people can deal with it.
Just tell me the rules.
Yeah.
Right. I just want to know what not to do and what to do.
Yeah.
Make it easy for me.
Yeah. I have settled for me that it is okay to eat meat sacrificed to idols. Period. Right.
It wouldn't have taken 2.5 pages. It would have been much shorter. Yeah.
But Paul doesn't go there, right? He's like, I just imagine him like, listen, like at dinner, before they eat, and tell me, your story and what's your background, and how'd you come to faith in Jesus, and where are you at with food sacrificed to idols?
Yeah.
And he's like, okay, yeah, I'll meet you there.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's that messy work that this is, man. It's definitely not a one size fits all.
No.
And it's what's beautiful. It's what's beautiful about the Christian faith, because what we're talking about is so much bigger. I got to do this. We got to pray with a bunch of people Monday night.
This week has been
Monday night, I got to go out on on Maple Street, that little plaza.
Yeah.
Right. So right downtown. And there was like 6 different churches there.
Right on.
And 40 people maybe. It was really cool though. And we just were praying for the city and praying together. And now I forgot what I was going to say. Hold on, it's going to come to me. If I keep talking, does it just come? No. What were we? There was a way that this tied.
That it's not black and white. It's not easy. It's not just easy.
It's not. Man, I didn't want to just highlight that we were praying. I did want to invite people into prayer. But golly, there was something really. There was a connection there in the way that we were praying. This is called bad podcasting. This is podcast fail right here. It will come to me.
You just wanted us to all know you were praying publicly.
Yes!
On the street. You have your reward.
I got my reward.
You have your reward.
Darn it.
That verse was actually in my notes. I never got to it though.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. There's so much in here that it really could.
That's so funny.
Golly, Josh. That's just in our prayers though. It had something close. If I keep saying things, it's not going to happen. Darn it.
You just let me know when you're ready to move on.
All right. Well, it's been nice. It's been nice having you here and joining us. Oh my goodness. All right, we're gonna have to transition because I'm having that moment.
That is so funny, man.
Yeah, no, it's not. It's sad.
It is. It's funny. It is funny.
All right, I apologize. I'm gonna have to rewind this and then come back next week and be like, oh, this is what I meant.
That's what I was gonna say.
I wish I could just hit rewind here. But that would take editing.
Yeah, we're not going to go there.
We're not going to do that. No,
we don't need that.
Okay, so Utopia is what Carolyn's bringing up here, and I want to bring this up. So, because we were talking about this ideal world, like, wouldn't it be great? And she brings up this idea that the definition is an imagined place or state of things in which everything is perfect. That becomes a problem, and it's been a problem that people have put misplaced faith in politics. That's key right there. In a political utopia, in an ideal world, and even we do it with a Christian utopia.
Yeah, that's true.
That's a great point.
Yeah,
because this idea, and it's often looking backwards, that something was perfect about, or utopian or great about that we need to look back to and recover somehow.
Yeah.
and it has all the benefits of a great way to look at the world, except for being true, right? So because it wasn't that great.
Yeah.
There were challenges. There were challenges. I'm saying, okay, our country has been great, but there's been challenges that we dealt with that are different than we do now.
Always.
And the big question is, there was a lot of people it wasn't great for.
Yeah.
Right. And in fact, it was so bad that it's hard to even say what was great.
Mm-hmm.
That's such a hard thing. And so we get into trouble whenever we put our faith, like how she put misplaced faith.
Yeah.
In
that's a good line.
In an idea instead of in a person.
Yes.
Instead of our hope is in Jesus. Our hope is not in my idea of what Jesus is going to do.
Yeah.
My hope is in a person.
Mm-hmm.
And I can trust that person because I know enough about him because what I read in scripture, and I know that what's going to happen is going to be good. I don't know exactly what it's going to be, though.
Yeah.
And if try to arrange my life for some end goal, I might turn out a lot like the Pharisees in Jesus' day.
Yes.
That missed him completely.
Yeah. Her quote reminds me of Dietrich Bonhoeffer in his book Life Together.
Yes.
Writes about the fact that in order for true community to form, the ideal community has to die. Or like the dream of community in your mind has to die, because the real community will never really live up to that. And if we're just going after that, we might miss what's in front of us. And usually the ideal is more based around maybe what we get than what we're called to give. And so his challenge was like, let that die and embrace the community that's right in front of you with all of its messiness and flaws and all of it, and be exactly where God has planted you to be. So that was his.
I love that.
Sort of dovetailing thought from.
That's
Carolyn.
what a great principle.
Yeah.
And what a great marriage principle.
Yeah. Marriage. I mean, I think your civic life, I think of like all these things, like what does it look like for us to really be present where we are?
Yeah.
And to say it's not the ideal, and yet it is the real, and it's exactly where God wants to meet me.
Totally. Yeah. I think so many people have this ideal of what marriage should be, and this ideal of what the other should give them or be for them, instead of actually just loving the other. It's the person, not this ideal. And even with God, we can get so enamored by an idea about God instead of just pursuing God.
Mm-hmm.
We think about him, we read about him, all those things, but what if we talk to him?
Yeah.
What if we listen to the Spirit? Oh my goodness. Yeah.
That's good stuff.
Yeah. So Carolyn, thank you, Carolyn, as one who has lived a while, she says. That's sweet.
That's great.
I don't remember the good old days as that free from trouble and heartache.
Yeah,
I don't. I appreciate that perspective. And so let's, here's the thing. Let's make the good old days.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the good old days. One day we'll be thinking back, and we always think back and make it better than it is.
That's right.
But we have an opportunity now.
It's like that Andy Bernard quote from The Office.
Oh, come on.
Yeah. He says, gosh, I wish there was a way to know you were in the good old days before they were gone.
Oh, I know. That's so good.
It's a great line.
Such
isn't
a great
it?
line. It's so, oh, man.
There you go.
It had some good moments. Dang, that's good. Well, okay. Well, so I love where we went with this. We didn't really you're gonna have to really listen to this message though to get it all. Because I thought that was a really fun conversation. Thank you for diving in.
It was a fun conversation.
That was really cool. So but without further ado, I think we need a segment that we haven't had.
We haven't had it in a few weeks.
So pardon me. Because Bad podcasting. Ladies and gentlemen, Ryan brought a book.
I did.
I have my sign up. I can't. Can I be the sign guy?
Yeah.
No, you have to be the sign guy.
I don't need a duck.
Like this.
Okay, so my book is thematic for the Hallmark calendar. We have Father's Day coming up this weekend.
Oh yes.
And so I'm doing just a 5-week morning study with some of the guys at our church. And I brought a resource today that I took some things out of that I wanted to encourage them with. And the book is called The Intentional Father by John Tyson. And this is a book that I stumbled across a number of months ago because I was trying to plan my son Ethan's sort of 13-year-old rite of passage. And John has just done great work on men discipling their kids. Yeah. And so, and I just love John Tyson. Anyway, I think he's a great voice and just a phenomenal communicator. So this is a book that I would recommend not just to dads, although if I could buy it for every dad in our church, I would. But also just for men, but just people in general. There's some just really, really good things about what it looks like to become a disciple in here and some of the challenges that that are in front of us. So there are things that are unique to fatherhood, but I think it transcends that space.
Yeah. So it's, I mean, almost anybody wanting to be intentional.
Yeah.
Right. About the faith.
Yeah. I mean,
about how they influence people.
Because it addresses issues like home values, like how to prepare for the life's moments, self-discovery. The thing I talked about today was the arc of life. And he in this book, he lays out different ways that different seasons of our life and really decades of our life are defined by an overarching focus. And that changes as we get older and move through our life. And so I thought the way he laid it out was just really good. So I shared it with some of the guys this morning. And then we just talked about what it looks like to be faithful in whatever season of life we're in. So like we're both in our 40s. He says, your 40s are about mastering. You still have energy, and it combines with a bit of idealism about how your life in the world should be. You have a cause, and you're getting better at it, and you're going for it. In your 40s, you emerge as a master of your craft. And then, after that, the 50s, he says, are about harvesting. It's a decade where you can hopefully start to bring about the results of decades of previous work. Anyway, so he goes through each season and gives his idea of what the overarching theme of that season of life is. That's cool. So I highly recommend it, especially all the fathers out there. Intentional Father, John Tyson. Go pick it up.
All right. Sounds good. Well, man, how cool is that? And thank you so much to everybody for diving in with us today. Thank you to everybody who joined in on the comments, and I definitely shout out to everybody who listens afterwards. I know that 3:00 on a Wednesday is not ideal for everybody, but there's a bunch of people who are watching after the fact or listening on the podcast feed. And so we so appreciate it. As always, if you have any questions, anything comes up on a Sunday, maybe it's in a sermon, but maybe it's just about life. Maybe it's just about whatever. We'd love to answer their questions, and you can email us at questions@efcc.org, and we absolutely love those questions. So anyway, as Michael says, hope to see you on the trail, on the trail of life. Yes. And everybody, God bless you. Have a great week. Hope to see you next time.
Yep. We'll see you.
God bless.